The council chamber fell silent when Captain Elena Vasquez walked through the massive stone doors. She stood barely 5 feet tall among creatures that towered over her like living mountains. The Vraxian elders watched her with their golden eyes, their gray fur bristling with open distrust. Each of them stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in thick muscle and sharp claws that could tear through starship metal. They were the most feared predator species in the known galaxy, and they had just been told that this small, soft human would lead their hunting pack. Elder Koroth rose from his carved throne, his voice rumbling like distant thunder across the chamber. He spoke slowly, making sure every word carried weight. He said that the human was weak. He said that she had no claws, no fangs, no speed to match the Vraxian hunters. How could such a creature lead the greatest predators in the universe? It was an insult to their ancestors and their ways. Elena did not flinch. She had faced death many times before arriving on this world. She had survived the collapse of the mining colony on Kepler 7. She had walked through fire on the burning stations of the Outer Rim. She had lost friends, lost family, and lost everything except her will to keep moving forward. The growling of angry aliens did not scare her anymore. She spoke calmly, telling the council that she did not come to replace their traditions. She came because the Galactic Alliance needed unity between species. The Vraxians had agreed to join the war against the Dominion, but they needed a liaison officer. Someone who could bridge the gap between their hunting culture and the tactics of modern warfare. She was that bridge. Another elder named Thessa laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. She asked if the human thought she could understand the hunt. She asked if Elena knew what it meant to track prey across frozen mountains for days without rest. She asked if Elena had ever felt the heat of fresh blood on her tongue after a kill. The Vraxians were not pets to be trained. They were apex predators who bowed to no one. Elena remained calm. She said that she did not need to be the fastest or the strongest. She only needed to understand strategy, patience, and loyalty. Those things had no species. Those things lived in the heart, not the body. The council rejected her words with angry growls and dismissive waves of their massive paws. They declared that she could stay on the planet, but she would never lead a hunting pack. She would be nothing more than an observer, a small creature watching from the shadows while true predators did the work of warriors. Elena accepted their decision without argument. She walked out of the council chamber with her head held high, ignoring the whispers that followed her. She knew that respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned through action, not words. The following weeks were difficult. The adult Vraxians ignored her completely. They treated her like she was invisible, walking past her without acknowledgement. Some of them made cruel jokes about her size and her strange flat teeth. Others simply stared at her with cold contempt, waiting for her to give up and leave their world. But Elena did not leave. She woke up every morning before the sun rose and studied the Vraxian language until she could speak it without mistakes. She learned their history, their songs, their legends of ancient hunters who had conquered entire worlds. She memorized the names of every elder and every warrior. She observed their hunting patterns and their social structures until she understood them better than some of their own kind. And she noticed the cubs. The young Vraxians were curious in ways that the adults were not. They watched her from behind rocks and trees, their small golden eyes filled with wonder instead of hate. They had never seen a human before. To them, Elena was not an insult to their traditions. She was simply something new and interesting. One morning, Elena sat alone by the river that ran through the main village. She was reading reports on her datapad when she heard a small sound behind her. She turned and found a young cub standing 3 feet away, his silver fur still fuzzy with youth. His name was Corin, and he was the son of Elder Koroth himself. He was supposed to hate her more than anyone, but instead, He was staring at her with open curiosity. Elena smiled at him and asked if he was lost. Corin shook his small head. He said that he wanted to know why she was not afraid. All the other species that came to their world were scared of the Vraxians. They trembled and begged and ran away at the first growl, but the human sat by the river like she belonged there. Elena thought about her answer for a long moment. Then she told him that fear was a choice. She said that she had been afraid many times in her life. She had been afraid when her ship crashed on a hostile world. She had been afraid when she watched her crew die around her. But she learned that fear only had power when you let it control you. She chose to face it instead of running from it. Corin sat down beside her, his small tail curling around his feet. He asked her to tell him about the crash, and Elena did. She told him about the fire and the smoke and the screaming. She told him about crawling through the wreckage with broken ribs and a fractured leg. She told him about walking 40 miles through a frozen wasteland with nothing but her determination to keep her alive. The young cub listened with wide eyes. When she finished, he asked how she had survived when she was so small and weak. Elena laughed softly. She told him that survival was not about size or strength. It was about refusing to quit. It was about finding reasons to keep fighting even when everything seemed impossible. Word spread among the cubs. The next day, 3 more young Vraxians came to find her. The day after that, there were 7. Within a week, Elena had a small following of curious cubs who gathered around her every morning to hear her stories and ask her questions. She taught them things that the adults would never teach. She showed them how to read star maps and calculate hyperspace jumps. She explained the tactics of modern warfare and how strategy could defeat raw strength. She told them about the other species in the galaxy and how each one had unique gifts to offer. The cubs started calling her something in their ancient tongue. The word meant something like silent teacher or patient hunter. It was a title of respect that even some adult Vraxians had never earned. Elder Koroth discovered what was happening when he found his son reciting human battle tactics to a group of other cubs. His rage was immediate and terrible. He stormed through the village looking for Elena, his claws extended and his fangs bared. He found her sitting in the same spot by the river, surrounded by nearly 20 young Vraxians. He roared at her, demanding to know what she thought she was doing. He accused her of corrupting the youth and poisoning their minds with alien ideas. He said that she had no right to teach Vraxian cubs anything. He raised his massive paw, ready to strike her down. But then something happened that no one expected. Corin stepped between his father and Elena. His small body trembled, but his voice was steady. He told his father that the human had taught them more about courage than any adult had ever taught them. She had shown them that strength came from the mind and the heart, not just the body. One by one, the other cubs moved forward. They formed a line between Elena and the elder, their small bodies creating a wall of fur and defiance. None of them growled or showed their claws. They simply stood in silence, their golden eyes fixed on the adult who threatened their teacher. Elder Koroth stared at the cubs in shock. He had never seen anything like this. Young Vraxians were taught to respect their elders without question. They were taught that strength and aggression were the only paths to honor. But these cubs were demonstrating something different. They were showing loyalty, unity, and quiet courage. The silence stretched on for a long moment. Then Elder Thessa emerged from the crowd of adults who had gathered to watch. Her voice was soft when she spoke. She said that perhaps they had been wrong about the human. Any creature who could inspire such loyalty in their young deserved a second look. Koroth lowered his paw slowly. His anger faded into confusion, and then into something that looked almost like respect. He looked at his son, standing there with determination in his young eyes, and he saw something he had never noticed before. He saw growth. He saw change. He saw the future of his people. He turned to Elena and asked her a simple question. He asked her what she had taught them that made them willing to stand against their own elder. Elena rose to her feet, the cubs parting to let her through. She walked forward until she stood face to face with the massive predator. She looked up at him without fear. She told him that she had taught them nothing that they did not already know. She had simply reminded them that true strength was not about crushing the weak. It was about protecting those who could not protect themselves. It was about standing for what was right, even when standing alone. The cubs had found that courage inside themselves. She had only helped them see it. Elder Koroth was silent for a long time. Then he did something that shocked everyone present. He lowered his head in the traditional gesture of respect, his massive form bowing before the small human. He said that perhaps the council had been wrong. Perhaps leadership was not about claws and fangs. Perhaps it was about something deeper that they had forgotten in their pride. From that day forward, Elena Vasquez was no longer an observer. She was named the first human to lead a Vraxian hunting pack. The cubs who had defended her became her personal guard, training under her guidance as they grew into powerful warriors. And when the war against the Dominion finally came to their world, it was Elena who led the charge. She rode into battle alongside creatures that towered over her like giants, but none of them saw her as small anymore. They saw her as their leader, their teacher, and their friend. The galaxy would remember the day when a lone human changed the hearts of the greatest predators in the universe. Not through force or violence, but through patience, kindness, and the quiet courage to stand firm when everyone else wanted her to fall. And the cubs who had walked beside her in silence became the legends of a new generation. They told their own children about the small alien who taught them that true power came from the heart. And those stories spread across the stars, reminding everyone that humanity was never to be underestimated. For sometimes, the smallest creatures carried the greatest fire,